Say It Loud Network presents Corner Table Talk.
Welcome, everybody, to Corner Table Talk. And today I am so happy to have as my guest the lovely and talented Tracee Ellis Ross. Hey, Tracee.
Hi, Brad. It's so good to see you. I wish it was in person, but this is pretty good.
I know.
Thank you for having me.
So everybody knows who you are. Award-winning actress, producer, activist, CEO has been added to your long list of accomplishments with Pattern Beauty, and even your hair care line is like winning awards. This is ridiculous, Tracee. You just can't stop. So you've been honored all over the place. If I were to continue to read, that would be all we'd get to today. But I want to talk to you. I don't just want to list your accomplishments, although they are many, and I do want to name a few. So Style Icon in 2020. I thought that was pretty cool. And all Golden Globe winner, nominations for everything. I mean, it goes on and on, Tracee. So we start things off with what I call short order questions, just easy questions for you. And I've read a few places where you've answered some of these things. So I had to work to come up with some things that just weren't the same things everybody else has asked you. So I'm going to try that. So anyway, what time of day do you feel most inspired creatively?
My favorite time of day is between 3 and 6. I don't know why, but I seem to feel the most in my skin, the most present, and I don't know. It's like my favorite time of day. It's my favorite time to eat. It's my favorite time to work. But I think the most inspiring time of day for me might be the quiet in the morning. I used to be like in high school, for example, I was a track runner. So I would get home from school and I was so tired that I would shower, eat dinner, go to bed, and I would wake up at 5 in the morning to do my homework before going to school. And it has proved in my life to be a productive hour. There's just a stillness that's happening everywhere. There's not a lot incoming, and I can have really good inspirational thought. Because of my job, though, Brad, and waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning for work, sometimes that hour is just spent like dragging my feet to the shower.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but I would say my most inspired time of day would be between 6 and 9 in the morning. And then my favorite time of day would be between 3 and 6 p.m.
Okay. I'm a late afternoon. I love the late afternoon. I really do. I like the right music, a little wine, just that vibe, that mood. Yeah.
And as I've gotten older, I've noticed that I prefer to drink when the sun's up so that it doesn't affect my sleep. So the sugar
as opposed to that's another story. We won't
but like as opposed to before bed, like with dinner, like having a glass of wine. I don't like a glass of wine with dinner. I would prefer like an afternoon like glass of wine, and then it's out of my system and I'm good. Processing sugar gets harder the older you get.
Yes, it does, as does other things.
Yes, that's true.
So tell me the quality that you most cherish in a friend.
It's interesting. I think accountability ends up resulting in the safety and the trust. So somebody that feels like you can depend on them, dependability and accountability. And it's funny because if I look at, by the way, Brad, all my best friends are exactly the same. It's still Samira, like same best friends from all the years I've known you. And we're the same kind of people. We're, they're people I would put in my will, trust with my beloveds. And there's a sense of dependability, accountability, and trust that is the basis of those friendships.
And, because you are a good friend and you've held on to your longtime friends, I'm sure they've enjoyed this ride with you.
I've also enjoyed the ride with them. It's also beautiful looking at my friends and seeing who they have become, mostly as human beings. I feel such, I don't know if pride's the right word, but so inspired by who my friends are as people, who they are as parents, who they are as friends, who they are as kids. Because, I'm at that age where our parents are aging and taking on that new relationship with your parents and what that feels like. And so seeing who my friends have become has been extraordinary. And having that, particularly through this pandemic, realizing the friends I have and the long time knowingness between us is so valuable and invaluable. Like it's just something you can't describe to have that history with people. But yeah, it's been fun for them. And also they couldn't care less.
Perfect.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly the way it should be.
Yep. All right. So tell me, last time I saw you were kind of driving a pretty fly ride, but I won't identify the car, but I take it you like to drive. So Tracee, what's your favorite drive in LA?
Well, to be honest, there's never a day I'm not working, Brad. If you decide to be a CEO and an entrepreneur and a producer, there's never a day you're not working. But I'll be honest as well. I don't like driving. I would really happily be driven everywhere. I'm not driven everywhere, but I would happily be driven everywhere. I think if there's a ride I like to take, it would be from my house to my mom's house, because I know where I'm going. I know I'm going to mom's and I'm going to be like laying on the floor. We're a family that likes to lay on the floor. Like, I don't know what that's about, but all the kids, like everybody on the floor. So to me, it's like driving there to go do that.
Got to get those Rosses some furniture, man. It just,
we don't seem to use the furniture. It's strange, right? But we really, and it's fascinating, but we really like the floor.
I understand, actually. So, all right. So then New York, what's your favorite walk in New York City? I know you're a New Yorker. Central Park.
It blows my mind every time I'm in there. The fact that in the middle of that concrete jungle, this extraordinary park is cared for, the architecture that's still in there, the nature, the foliage. Like I had my reuniting with my dad last month, and it was one of the most special moments. Wow. Boy, did my heart fill up in that after not seeing him for a year and all the fear that we had been through. And we walked around the reservoir in New York together and just walked and talked. And he explained every flower, every plant, the care that goes into them. As if the park was his. But Central Park, and the walks along Central Park on any end, like Central Park, South, Fifth Avenue, like no matter where you are, walking along the park is just glorious. But any walk in New York is good.
Yeah.
New York really gives a good walk, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. I used to run around the reservoir in Central Park, and it was just such an inspirational run. You could see the buildings along Central Park West, and just everywhere you look, there's just beauty. I love the park as well. Yeah. All right. Favorite Jackson 5 song that you sing loudly to when no one else is around?
Oh God, why can't I think of what that song is? What's the one where in the video he's going like this? He's so teeny. Oh God, I don't know what that
I Want You Back. Not Maybe Tomorrow. No,
keep going. Let's look it up. Let's look up Jackson 5 songs.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yep. Google is our best friend. Best Jackson 5 songs. I'll be there, I would say. I'm going to go with that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll take that. Oh, it's the We'll Never Can Say Goodbye gets you though. I'm going to go with Never Can Say Goodbye. That's what I'm going with. Never Can Say Goodbye.
That's your final. That's your final.
That's my final answer, sir.
We can't go back.
We're not going back. That's my final answer. Okay. Goes down in history.
Last one of these. Your fondest childhood memory around food.
Okay. My mom growing up used to make, she has not made this in years. She would slice zucchini, tomato, and put Parmesan cheese and Lipton onion soup mix and bake it in the oven. I don't know what that dish was. I don't know what you call it, but it was so delicious. It was sort of like an eggplant Parmesan, but with no eggplant. And it was so good. And also anything on my mom's plate is better than your plate.
So you snatch off your mom's plate.
Yes. And my seat at the dinner table was always, all through growing up, was always right next to my mom. And both of us used the salt shaker a lot. And we're both right-handed. So it was a constant, we never thought to get 2 salt shakers, but it was constant, like, pass the salt, because we would both I would sit it on the right-hand side. And so she couldn't get to it. And, but anything on her plate was better seasoned and just like just perfect, even if it was the same thing on your plate. So my mom's a great cook.
Is she?
Yeah.
So while she's busy talking, you're just busy snatching things off of her plate and looking at her intently.
Yeah. Yes, and you can see me doing that.
I can picture that. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So let's dive in. I'm sure that you hate how we met stories. But I'm going to tell one anyway. So this is, are you going to tell the how we met? I'm going to tell the how we met.
This is the best story. Okay.
So I'm on the beach.
Oh my God. This is the best. story.
In the Bahamas. It's Harbor Island. It's the Pink Sands. It's a beautiful hotel. This is back in the 90s before we all knew who Tracee was about to be. And so I'm out on the beach and I see this beautiful woman make her way down to the water and go deep, just deep enough, waist deep. So she bends over and we all know she has, long, beautiful hair. She dunks her hair in the water and then flips it back up over her head like a movie. And I'm watching this and I'm saying, that looks interesting. She looks interesting. I'm going to have to mosey on over there. There's nobody else. We're the only two black people at the Pink Sands. So we might as well get to know each other. Anyway, long story short, I introduced myself to Tracee. We end up taking a long walk on the beach. The Pink Sands was a beautiful hotel with a series of bungalows on the beach. Great little spot. And we spent some time together. We had a great talk and we went to get something to eat.
Yeah, we drove off the property of the hotel and you brought me to some really yummy restaurant and we played pool.
You remember that?
I remember all that. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. And and it was cool, and I just felt like we had a connection then and we've been friends ever since. So that was 1990 something. So Tracee, when you knowing now where you are and all that you've been able to do, I mean, you graduated from Brown. It wasn't like you came, we all know who your mom is and some of your background, but you had an uphill climb. And I remember meeting you then and things weren't for sure. You didn't know exactly what was going to happen. It wasn't a crystal ball. So what would Tracee today look back and tell Tracee that met Brad on the beach in 1995? What would you share with her? Some don't worry, it's going to be okay, or what kind of words of wisdom might you tell your younger self? I'm
going to answer that, and then please remind me to go back to our first meeting because I'm going to add a couple of fun details to that because it's fun. But I think it's so funny that vacation was the first vacation I went on by myself. That was the first of many because I do that now all the time. To think back that I was in my early 20s and was already somebody who was bold enough to travel on her own is hilarious to me. And it was the first vacation I paid for myself out of money I had worked and earned. And I was very proud. I felt very proud of what I had accomplished at that moment. But it is true. I had no idea. Everything felt like I have no idea how you get from who you imagine yourself to be, the dreams that you have, what you imagine accomplishing, and how you get there. And so looking back, I mean, oh gosh, this was before Girlfriends, before Lyricist Lounge, before moving to LA. I think I would say to that young gal, hang in there. Hang in there. And in the moments when you start to turn on yourself, thinking that it is something you are doing wrong, if you could just be gentler with yourself, because I think of the journey, the up and down, even after Girlfriends, like there was no guarantee. Like I thought the pearly gates of Hollywood were going to open. They did not. There were not stacks of scripts at my door after Girlfriends. And, I am only now hearing, I recently heard, for example, I was interviewed by, I will leave the names out, but a manager that after Girlfriends had hip pocketed me, which means his agency hadn't agreed to take me on, but he was a high powered manager at a big management firm that was like a dream for me. I was like, if you can get at a management firm like that, like my career could keep going. It was a big deal that he had decided to hip pocket me. And we did that for a month or so. And then he said he couldn't take me on. And I recently was interviewed by him for something. And he told me the story of what actually happened behind the scenes. Now I got dropped by him and was devastated. I was like, there was no other manager that wanted to take me. There were no jobs on the horizon. Like I didn't know what was happening. And of course it was, as a woman, as a Black woman, and as myself, I'm one of those people that's like, what did I do wrong? What can I do differently? How can I be better? How can I be more? What else am I supposed to do? And he told me that the management company said to him, stories about Black girls and Black women do not sell and nobody wants them. So you pick one Black female client and you drop the rest because we're not paying the bill on that, basically. Now, had I known that then, I don't think I would have taken it personally, and perhaps it would have been enough fuel for me to start doing what I'm doing now, which is making space for others, changing the systems in this industry, continuing to push to open up the real estate and to create new tables if those tables don't want to include us in them or whatever those things are. But I didn't have that information. And it's not to say that I would change the journey, but I think that the times that I raked myself over the coals and took responsibility in places and for things that were more about the systems problems than my own personal foibles, I think I would have had a little bit more joy in my experience. And it would have been a softer road to get here. But I also wouldn't change any of it. You know, even on the road with the hair company, it took me 10 years to get this company off the ground. 10 years. And every no that I got, every laugh in my face, every why you, every this doesn't make sense, every who cares, every whatever those things were, I would take the hit and then clarify my vision, my mission, the promise of the brand, what I wanted the brand to be. And I learned that because I did have a lot of disappointments. And it didn't just go easily. Nothing was handed to me. I mean, you know, you've known me for all these years. It was not like you're Diana Ross's daughter. Here you go. Like none of that happened.
And I remember actually, you know, you got girlfriends but leading up to girlfriends, there was, you know, it wasn't like a blast off. There was still, you know, a few stops and starts. And of course, I'm not aware of everything that happened with you, but even post girlfriends, there wasn't this. I mean, everybody that watched that show, that loved that show, knew you were a star, knew that you should have a bigger platform, except Hollywood. You know, and it took them a minute, you know, to catch on. And it's ironic to me that the show that ABC would finally say yes to is Blackish. And
let me tell you something. That was so hilarious to me. I was like, I finally make it to ABC and the show's called Blackish. I was like, what is that? This is insane. I was like, been trying to get on the networks and now networks don't even mean anything anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the most bizarre journey, but yeah.
But before we go too far, so embarrass me, tell me, or if you're going to tell me the story.
No,
I maybe know the one that you're going to tell, but if not, I'll tell the other.
No, I won't tell that one. There's no need. We can keep that as our hilarious ridiculousness. But I will say this. So I saw you before you saw me, and I came from the airport and my room wasn't ready. So I had on my airport clothes and I sat down at a table for lunch. You know, that's what they do when your room's not ready. They put you to have some food. So I sat down at the table and I looked over and I was like, oh my God. I was like, who's that man? He's gorgeous. I was like, oh boy, this is a problem. I was like, oh my goodness, how uncomfortable. So I was like, that's okay. I just come from the airport. I don't, whatever. So then I go to my room, I do whatever. And then when I decided to go to the beach, Brad, I looked down and I saw your sneakers because I had noticed which sneakers you had on while you were having lunch, and your sneakers were left on the stairs going down to the beach. And I was like, that man is on the beach. That man is on the beach. Where? Because there was no one on that beach.
No.
There was not a person at that resort, it seemed. And so yes, it was your sneakers that were your telltale sign. And I literally have the image of your sneakers in my head. And then we played pool and blah, blah, and we've been friends ever since.
Yeah, it's been great. So, Tracee, you mentioned just recently getting on a plane for the first time during the pandemic, and you went to see your dad. How was that for you? How was the experience of finally getting up the nerve to, like, you know, it's safe enough and you know, going to see your dad? What was that like for you?
Well, I would not have considered even getting on a plane were it not for work. I had a job that I couldn't say no to. And I was like, oh, this is one of those jobs I dreamt of all those years ago. Like, I want this job. And I had gotten them to move the date of the job to after my second shot. So I would have not gotten on the plane if I wasn't vaccinated. I don't think I could have done it because I happen to be one of those people that was full on lockdown and terrified. I did not leave my house. I didn't go to the market. I didn't go anywhere. My whole family was the same. We all really respected each other's space and safety, particularly my mom. And all of us are here in LA, but we really stayed apart. And if we saw each other, we were outside. We didn't hug, like none of those things. And I went to work. I did my job, but people are like, you were with people at work. I'm like, it was like military precision. Everybody was separated at work. Like there was we were one of the most successful shows. We did 22 episodes. We started started at the beginning of August, and we didn't have any cases. We were like by the book. So getting on the plane was terrifying to me. I had an astronaut helmet that had an air filtration system in it. I double masked. I would not go to the bathroom. I wiped down my area and put a seat cover. And I will tell you that the first 10 to 15 minutes when I sat down on the plane, I just couldn't stop crying. Not out of fear of getting COVID, but I had not been in close proximity with other people that I didn't know in over a year. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself was just really a lot to take in. And I think this re-emerging for everybody is going to be a process that we all have to make our way through. I was talking to Samira and her son. Her son Lex is 5, and and my brother and his 2 kids. My brother Ross has 2 kids, by the way. They all have kids. Everybody has kids with me. But the kids are so attached to their parents, can't leave the house. And I'm thinking, if the kids are having that kind of anxiety, I'm having my own version in these other things, So it's just a process, and I'm trying to be really gentle with myself and other people and stay compassionate for everybody as we make sense of this. And I can't even wrap my head around the fact that it's been a year.
I know. And the range of emotion last year just brought out, talk about crying and anger and confusion
oh my God.
And anxiety. I'm curious though, you mentioned hugging, and do you think that changes the way people will interact now that we've been through this pandemic and hopefully are coming out of the other end? But I don't know how anxious I feel to hug people.
I am all over the hugging, Brad. I literally am like, are you vaccinated? Have you had your second shot? And then I'm like, bring it in. Okay. Like, bring it in. And I have to say that I hope we are forever changed. And I hope that this feeling of everything is new and the deep gratitude of some of the simplest things remains, because it feels like now I'm like a crazy lady. Like, I went on a plane again. I went to Cabo by myself. And, I was there and I was like, everything just felt incredible. Like, for the whole year, I wouldn't order takeout food. Like, I only cooked my own food. And so even ordering from one of my favorite restaurants, it's just like, oh, this tastes so amazing. You know what I mean? Like, just like going back to some of the things that I loved, feels really special. So
yeah, I would agree. You played a pretty prominent role. You were, you hosted the second night of the DNC, and it was at a time when we all know how important an election that was, but it was at a time when everybody was just hoping that we were going to find our way through what we had been experiencing. And, I know enough about you to know that you take good care of yourself. Self-care is a big thing for you. And I would have to imagine, Tracee, that going into a moment like that, knowing how many people are watching, knowing what's at stake, you had to have been centered, like really deep in some kind of a special place to be able to step up on that stage and have the presence that you did and grab the moment in the way that you did. Can you reflect on that moment a little bit?
Yeah, I was terrified and also really humbled to show up and be of service in that way. And it took a lot of preparation and a lot of pushing and a lot of, pushing to make sure that what I was saying felt true to me and like it was genuinely being of service to the moment that we were in, and sort of being a facilitator for all of us into this political moment, and making sure that we understood not only our power as people, but the importance of using that power and what it meant and why in every election, but particularly this one, we had to show up, and so it felt for me like an evolution of who I have been becoming and how I have found my political voice and my socially active voice, and using that currency to actually engage people. And it was, it was also the first time I had been, when was that? When was the DNC? It was like August. Was it August? It was before I went back to work. I think it was before I went back to work. So
I think it was August.
It was the first thing and first place I went. And it was also like I had to go somewhere to do it. And I was just like, wow, my mind was blown. I was like, I don't know if I can do that. It seemed terrifying. And But I also thought it was so wonderfully done, the DNC. It really, particularly in what we were in and experiencing, it connected us to each other as a country and as citizens of this country in a way that I just thought was really well done. And I was so honored to be a part of it and there. But wow, I mean, we really have been through a lot. We were all so raw, George Floyd's murder had happened. There were, you know what I mean? We were in this wave, and, the shift of power into the Biden-Harris administration brought up so much grief of what we had been in for 4 years. I think of all the things we have seen with our eyes and experienced unprecedented time, but in all these different ways, as the soul of this country is like wrestling with itself, yet again, as we try and walk towards a better way of being, because this shit ain't working. So, and each of these moments, like, I feel like what we're in right now is like evidence that we must, each of us, show up as the most civically engaged individuals we have ever been, or it is going to go the wrong direction. We have seen that, and this is our country, and we have to keep showing up for it, or otherwise I do lose hope. To me, the action is what staying in action, staying in right action, in next indicated action, in following those people that do have the right information, asking questions, having a sense of curiosity about it, but also a sense of responsibility, is the only thing that doesn't leave me in a hopeless state, because it's really devastating. What is occurring in this country.
Yeah, and I think in the form of a question, I guess. So Barack got elected, the Obamas, really kind of ushered in a sense of, certainly pride. And I just love what they stood for. It just felt like I wanted to move to Washington, D.C. when it just really affected me like that. I wanted to open a restaurant there and just be a part of it all. And then we had what we had this past 4 years. And do you think that what we've gone through was necessary to inspire what has been inspired as a result? Certainly we could have done without the death and the devastation that's been caused. But did we get complacent?
I don't know. I didn't, but I also, it's like when you decide to clean out your closet, sometimes the room gets messier than it all looks like, I don't know if maybe it's sort of like this is, that's part of our country, like what we were just in, you know what I mean? That's here. So I don't know. I don't know if we got complacent. I don't know if it had to happen. It did happen. That's for sure. And we must respond to it and not pretend it's not here. But I also know that, not everybody has the luxury to get up, and not even luxury, but the wherewithal. Like, people are trying to survive. If you're at the pointed end of racism, sexism, you're trying to get up and keep a roof over your head. You know what I mean? Like, the system, the oppression is at your face. So I find that, whenever and whoever, and that in and of itself is resistance. You surviving, you thriving, in and of itself is an example of freedom and reverberates out as an energy that changes things. But there is real work to be done. Policy work, cultural work. We have evidence, like, culture influences policy. So the stories that we tell matter, how we tell stories, who tells the stories, those things matter, which is something that's come into play both in my company Pattern and also in my production deal and the projects that I'm developing, and making sure that, the development team all looks like is represented of who's telling the story, and the crew, and that we are pulling each other in all these ways and spaces and places. So I don't know that anyone can be complacent right now, but I do know that we are in a divided space, and people are dying. People are dying. Yeah. And it's not good.
You bring up a really good point. It's not just that the story gets told, your story gets told, but who gets to tell the story really shapes the narrative and how close to the truth it stays. And as you rise in prominence, I think the more people that you bring around you, I know you're gonna be a champion for that. I recently listened to, thanks to you a really interesting podcast called The Tightrope.
Yes.
Right? With Dr. Cornell West and I guess an old friend of yours, Tricia Rose, who also teaches up at Brown, where your alma mater. And I was really just so much I got out of that, Tracee. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because you were talking about, finding different ways to, I'm going to find the quote. You said, use of knowledge, let language be a tool, knowledge that is heart-based in a way that allows us to create frames in our life. This idea of creating frames in our life, it's a little bit more than compartmentalization, right? What you're talking about there. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw talks a lot about how it's very difficult to hold facts if there isn't a frame for them. And I think so often, particularly because of systemic racism and the systems of oppression that have been in place for so long, there are real blind spots around particular areas that there's no frame for. Like the easiest example I use is the term Black girl magic. Black women and girls have been extraordinary forever, have been all things to all people since the beginning of time, have been at the center of economic, political, cultural revolutions in this country. And yet our contribution is never really centered in the result. You look at election cycles, whatever those things are, and somehow the term Black girl magic has given people a frame with which to put our wonder, And so I think it's often our responsibility. I was talking about narrative, or I've taken it on as my responsibility to always name and claim the frame for the narrative so that people know where to place it. For example, the first time I was nominated for the Emmy, it was the first time in how many years? Like 30 some odd years, a Black woman had been nominated in the lead actress in a comedy category, which is absurd and is evidence to me of systemic problems, because Black women have been being the leads in our lives forever. So why has the art not reflected that, if art is meant to be a reflection of life? And so I made it my mission during that entire press cycle to constantly name not what the problem was, but what it needed to be, and put the frame around it for everybody. Like, Black women are the leads in our lives. Like, that's what we are. That's who we are. I stand on the shoulders of so many. I stand shoulder to shoulder with so many. And this is not about me. This is about the collective in this moment. And so I always encourage people to name the context. And that brings me back to what I was saying earlier. I didn't know, because of the privilege that I come from, the privilege of fame, of money, of light skin, of beauty, of all of these different privileges that have created particular blind spots for me in my life. I took a lot of things really personally. I thought it was me. It was me. It was me. I didn't know that because of how I was educated, my education, the fame I come from, the money I come from, like, I didn't realize that a lot of this racism was as prevalent as it was. And then you move out into the world. So I often think to myself, the frame is about creating context for people. And we are, as Black and brown people, so often decontextualized. Like, we don't have a context for our experience because the system doesn't make space for it. So I take it on my own responsibility to keep naming that. And I think it helps people to understand a humanity in a different way and in a more authentic way. Did I unpack that okay?
Yeah, perfectly. And, just to take it a little bit further, creatively in the characters that you portray, and I listened to in part of this podcast, you went into a couple of little funny characters that you do, but you talked about how even through characters, you can express things just by virtue of your portrayal of an image of someone that you have in your head that says even more than the words say, and you're trying to articulate a particular point of view. Just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think of like three different things when I'm playing a role. I mean, Bo Johnson and is the best example, and I've played her for a long time on Blackish, but I often think of like, is this true for the character? And then how does this look in the canon, in the context of television? So, should I, like, why am I doing this? Why am I carrying laundry in this scene? And is it appropriate for this scene? And even if it is, how does it look in the context of Black women on television or a wife on television? And is it necessary for that? Because even if it works for this moment, we are etched in time when we do something for television. And how does it play into the larger canon of how we are seen? And one of the things that was really important to me with Bo Johnson was that I was bringing a woman to the forefront that was thriving, not just surviving, that this was a relationship that was anchored in love and like, that these two people not only loved each other, but they liked each other, and that our comedy wasn't coming from rolling our eyes at each other, but actually from who we were as characters. And that my character was not just your typical sitcom wife, that my experience and my point of view was based in me and not in relationship to my husband. So I was a wife, a mother, a doctor, all of these things, not just the wife. So my storyline, my point of view, and the way that manifests, Brad, is like, it's a little challenging for the writers sometimes, because I'm like, but how does Bo feel about that? Why is Bo doing that? And even though the story is not told through Bo's eyes, I like to make sure that no matter how little or lot I'm saying on screen, that you can tell Bo has a life outside of that moment, so that I'm bringing the fullness and the wholeness of who she is into that moment. And I try and do that with all the characters that I play. And it's what I'm interested in developing, is human beings that have a wholeness to them, that continue to break down these limiting ideas of who we are as people.
You've also said that you have a gift for moving feelings, that you can take real big feelings and move them, and that you're not afraid to sit with people in their vulnerability and say, I hear you and I see you in that pain, and I thank you. What an honor that you shared that with me. So a couple of things come to mind when I read this. And, this reminds me of a friend of mine who's well known and who will often sit with me and have dinner and maybe engage the table next to us and ask about their kids, where they went to school, have this really like heart to heart talk. And then it's over and he moves on. And whereas if he didn't put an end to it there, he would have a million friends at his door. For someone like yourself, who anyone would want to buddy up and be friends with Tracee, is that part of what you're talking about, that you will be with someone in that moment and you will give them the space and the attention and the eye-to-eye contact and fully engage? But then you have to be able to move through that, past that, because if you continue to take everybody's pain on and sit with it, I guess much like a therapist, if therapists did that, they'd be batshit crazy, right?
Yeah.
Am I close in that analogy, or am I missing something?
No, I don't think you missed something. I don't know that I've ever thought of it that way, but I am also a really boundaried person. Like, I really do have boundaries, and know where I end and other people begin. I think my superpower around feelings is also, there's a depth to where I'm willing to let things move, and I feel things deeply. And I think it's one of the aces in my deck. I think it's why I'm good at what I do. And I also think it's why I navigate through the world in a really authentic way that is connected to other human beings. I'm a heart-based person. I'm a sort of body and soul-based person, not a mind-based person. But yeah, that's interesting. I do take stuff home, but yeah, I'm good at, when I say moving them through, like, yeah, it's present and then it moves through. I try not to, it's not even try. Once I've made sense of it and it's been processed, unpacked, and sort of broken down into bite-sized pieces, then everything goes where it goes, and then we move on to the next moment. But, I feel things big. I feel joy big. I feel sad big, anger, fury. I did my TED talk on the wisdom of fury, and women listening to that. I feel like I need to do another one on rage, because the racial reckoning and the wrestling of the soul of America around race, and what is emerging now in this divisive time, and from this last administration, and the just disgusting display of hate hatred that exists ignites a rage in me because I don't understand how people can justify some of the things they say. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a person. Like, a human being was killed, like, for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, I get it, like, it ignites this rage in me that I think a lot of us are feeling. It's a combination of, I go from this rage to just like a deep sadness that seems like inconsolable. Like, it just, it doesn't feel like there's a container deep enough or wide enough to hold the hurt and of what people are experiencing at the hand of oppression. It's really upsetting to me. But yes, I do. I move feelings, and I think that being able to move feelings is really important as an artist. And it is my feelings are the seeds of my intelligence.
It sounds like the epitome of mental discipline, really, because
interesting.
Yeah, you have a muscle there, obviously, and you're able to use that muscle as you need to. So, I got to work on it a little bit because I get stuck. Admittedly, I get a little stuck.
But I have to say, Brad, that's it is a skill that I have honed and crafted and worked, and and my job asks it of me. But also culturally, men are not given the space to learn that. You haven't grown, you grew up at a time and in a world where boys weren't supposed to cry. You know what I mean? So like, it is something that you do have to cultivate. And I think it would, the fact that you even say that means you're in the right place, because how would you know that? You know what I mean? Like, I always say, people, like, you come by that honestly.
But that's what also interested me when you were talking about the vocabulary, Tracee, because I find even amongst my men friends, and some articulate guys, we can't find the words. We know what we want to say. We know what we're feeling, but we don't have the ability to locate the words that touch the emotion, that convey it. Especially my black friends, we're getting better because this year really ripped a lot of us raw. And we've got most of my, black friends we have sons. And so everything that happened with the police touched us so deeply that, we could not, we had no choice but to be raw with one another over the phone, because most of us weren't able to see each other. But it was that kind of year. But anyway, to your point, I just feel like
before you move on from there, how old is Bryce right now, by the way?
32.
That's insanity.
32. Yeah, I know. Yeah. Bought a house last year, and
wow. Okay. Well, congratulations on having a 32-year-old young man son.
Well,
and what I will say about the vocabulary and the language, it started as very rudimentary for me. I remember sitting in a therapist's office, and there was one of those ridiculous posters on the wall with babies' faces, and it was like a big one, and it had all the different names of feelings. And I was like, wow, I thought there were 3. Like, I was like, this is nuts, so I do think learning that vocabulary, and the one tip that I will give you that I think is really helpful in finding the language, is asking your body where the feeling is, where the feeling lives. Is it in your heart? Is it in your stomach? Is it in your back? Is it in your neck? Is it in your jaw? And then literally having a dialogue, even if it's not out loud, of what is the feeling. Because if you can start not saying I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm whatever, but it feels tight, it feels heavy, it feels wet, it feels like, if you can go into that, which is a lot easier from a sensation place, if you're asking yourself where in your body it is, you can start to walk your way towards what the language would be to describe it.
Well, I think I read somewhere that if you weren't doing what you do, you might be a therapist. And, I'm afraid to ask what your rates might be, but I get a friends and family discount if I need another session, please.
Yeah, exactly.
So Tracee, you overcame, I remember, in fact, I don't know if you remember, but I connected you with a buddy of mine, John McClain, who has Marvin Gaye's old recording studio in Hollywood. And it's really a cool space. It's, like a museum to Marvin, and there's been a lot of interesting people that have been in that building, including you. And he gave you the space. I asked him if he wouldn't mind, connecting with you, and you agreed. You went in there. You were curious about, exercise exercising that part of your talent. You went in and you did something, you sang, and I never heard anything that came of it. But more recently, obviously with the movie that you just did, you actually sang, and you sang beautifully. But the pressure that had to have been on you to sing publicly like that, you talked about, once you've reached a certain height, you realize how far you can fall. Did you actually think that people would like attack you and take you down for having your own voice?
Yes. I mean, there is nothing, the irrational or rational, whatever it was so scary. And I will say thank you, Brad, because you were one of the people. And that was when I was 30. That was 18 years ago.
Wow.
It was so 29, 30 was when that was the first time I was like, okay, second time. First time was in high school. I did a little singing at a talent show. And then I was like, no, this is too scary. And then again, when I was 29, 30, and thanks to you introduced me to John, and I did record 2 songs. I recorded Stormy Weather and You Go to My Head so I could hear what I sounded like. And then I shut it down again. It was too scary. My mom is Diana Ross, and the idea in my head that I could be compared to her, that I would embarrass myself, I have no idea. I just couldn't get past the fear. And when this movie came along 18 years later, so I was 47 years old, I think, when the movie came along, and I went after it because I was like, I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. And I'm one of those people that I don't get afraid leading up. And then I do the thing and I like jump off the cliff. And then on my way down, I'm like, what the fuck did I just do? I'm like, that was so dumb. And I'm not joking. And it's really bad because you can't take it back. And you're just right. So then I go into like this tailspin of shame of like, I'm going to be obliterated. They're going to rip me apart. Like, what have I done? What am I thinking? And it was the most liberating experience of my life. I felt like I gained access to all of me, and I would love to keep doing some more singing. I mean, I wasn't bad, Brad.
You weren't bad. Tracee, you rocked it. In fact, the person who first brought my attention to the song was John McClane. He said, have you heard Tracee sing? And I said, oh, no, I wanted. And he was like, man, she can actually blow. So,
oh my God. You have to tell him I say hi. And
I will.
That is so crazy. Yeah, I charted. I was on the adult contemporary charts, Brad. I went to 14.
Ain't bad. That ain't bad.
Not bad for what did my mom say yesterday? My mom said something like, you're in your early 40s. I was like, oh no, Mom, we're past there now. I'm 48. I was like, we're in the upper 40s.
Mm-hmm. So
you were always 12 years older than me. You're 12 years older than me?
Who, me? You talking to me?
Excuse me. Are you 12 years younger than me?
Are you talking to me?
No, I'm not talking to you. I'm definitely not talking to you.
I am 64.
You're 64. Yeah, that's 48, 58. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we'll give it. We'll say 10 or 12, somewhere in that range.
Yeah,
that's fine.
That works. Okay.
Before I let you go, I have a couple of more things I want to talk to you about. So, and I want to, first say thank you, Tracee, because, through the time that I've known you, you've always shown up at places. I've been in the restaurant industry my whole life. When we first met, I had Georgia. You became a regular at Georgia. Then I went and opened the Sunset Room, and you actually came to the opening, and, you complimented me that night, and it just stayed with me. Usually I remember the bad things that people say to me about me, but in this case, I remember the good things. So there's my mental discipline at work. But you complimented me on what I had on. And, I'm not a fancy dresser. I wear what I'm comfortable in, but I just remembered just being made to feel like seen by you in that room. It was a huge space, a lot of people, a lot of activity, but you took the time to say something really sweet to me. You came, you showed up. You also came to BLT when I had the steak place on Sunset, Willie Jane in Venice. And I remember seeing you just before Blackish, was
Post
happening.
And Beam.
Yeah, and Post and Beam. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So, just thank you. You've been a good friend, and doing this show. Obviously, I'm not Jimmy Kimmel. This is a podcast done by your old pal. And here you are once again, showing up. So I think that says a lot about who you are as a person. So I wanted to make sure I got that out and thanked you properly.
Well, thank you for asking me. I also love seeing your evolution and ever growth. And also, I remember what you were wearing. You did look spiffy and great. And also, you are the master of lighting.
Oh,
Your restaurants were always like, everybody looked gorgeous. Like, it was just like you had the lighting to a T. It was a real thing. So a couple of restaurants, you could maybe give them some pointers.
a little lighting tips too.
Little lighting tips. Yeah.
That's the easiest thing to do. It's just everything on a dimmer. You can at least soften it, use the right bulb. Lastly, I found out about this rapper in Great Britain. His name is Swiss, and they started what they call Black Pound Day. And every first Saturday of the month, folks in Great Britain are encouraged to support a Black-owned business, Black-owned restaurant, Black-owned small business. And the store owners and restaurant owners are saying that this has had a profound impact on their sales. And all of this, of course, has been triggered by, what happened around the world during the protests of 2020 and a different level of awareness and the support that Black-owned businesses require and need. And I was curious, do you think something like that could work here? Do you think that there could be a Buy Black Day?
It's interesting. I think there is a Buy Black movement that's happening here as well. I think all of these pieces are needed in order to create equity in our community and balance the scales in a way that have lasting effect and change our sense of safety and freedom and opportunity. But I think it's more than that. I often say when I'm speaking to other CEOs, et cetera, it's not just about Buy Black. It's also where you spend your money in all aspects. It's changing what is on the shelves. It's not just about a day. It's about changing our practices. And I explain to people that DEI, not DNI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is not about sales. It's not about checking a box. It's about the love of humanity. And I think people need to change their mindset and understanding about that. And it will help to shift how we look at equity in this country. Diversity and inclusion, is just like, here, come, give me, it's like this concept of mentorship that, its intention is really good, but does it have the effect that we are looking for? Is it actually effective in balancing the scale? Is it actually effective in creating equity in communities that have systemically been left out and have been pushed out? So I think Buy Black is incredibly important. And I think it is helpful. There's evidence of that you say is happening in the UK. And there's a lot we got to do. And it's not necessarily work that we have to do. It's a wake up on the other side of your blind spots. Like there's way too many blind spots, some of which have been constantly played into in terms of systemic oppression.
Right. But, and I agree with you, just a couple of things though could certainly help. And, again, relating it specifically to Black-owned restaurants. And as you continue to rise in prominence, when there's a location required, go to a Black-owned restaurant and pay a location fee and shoot at the restaurant.
Yep.
Black catering, get some of these small Black-owned restaurants to do some catering on sets that, I don't know what contractually, you're allowed or not allowed, but is that something where there's an opportunity?
I think so. I think absolutely. I think we all have to think in different ways. And, I often talk about the pipeline because you have to understand that a lot of these companies have not been given those opportunities in a regular way. So they don't have the same kind of experience. So offering these opportunities in different places to companies that haven't been given those opportunities might mean that there's a different balance in terms of supporting them in that journey of growth. And I think that's part of it. There are extraordinary businesses here. It's like, look where you don't always look, people. And I do think that there's ways to continue to actively support Black businesses, and also hire, instead of constantly hiring around numbers and evidence, hire talent. That's how you start changing the scale. That's how you start creating fundamental change.
Couldn't agree more. Well, we're out of time. I know you have to run. Before I do let you go, as we've talked about, this past year has been, an emotional roller coaster for us all. But I tell you, I have had some of my heartiest laughs this year with some of my buddies on the phone, and we have just treasured those moments of laughter. So Tracee, just, you find humor in so much. What's the importance of a great sense of humor, a good laugh?
Oh, it's everything. It's like magic. It's like, to me, it's evidence that God exists. Like it opens your heart, and it's like the great connector. And it is one of the most delicious things and ways to connect with another person. And I think you can find humor in some of the darkest stuff. It's a point of identification, and I try and do it as much as possible.
Well, and you cause a lot of us to laugh uncontrollably, and we thank you for that. Tracee, thank you so much for taking some time, and I hope to have a meal with you soon and share some more stories and face to face.
Brad, are you in Miami? Where are you?
Yeah, in Miami now. I'll be back in LA soon to see Bryce, so maybe on a trip out there, if you're around, I'll give you a shout, see if you're available.
I would love it. Thank you. This was so wonderful. What a great conversation. I'm so happy you're doing this, and thank you.
Thank you, Tracee. Welcome, folks, to the segment of the show we call How We Move with Ambassador Shabazz. Tracee Ellis Ross, what a dynamic boss lady.
Absolutely. Chip off her old block, yes.
Yes, I would say.
Both mother and father notwithstanding, and a large family of siblings, and all of them are resonant. We know them differently. She's the one whose name perhaps maybe an Evan as well, but certainly representative of all the stock that from which she comes and the investment. Her mother, I've always heard, was an amazing mother, not just as an artist, but I'm talking about as a real maternal investor in her babies, and the freedom that she has and the support. I've just always watched that over the decades, and the comfort and freedom that we watched Tracee Ross share in terms of her journey. And that based on her roots, not just the fame, but real sound, familial, accessible mother, father, family self, that she was able to do that, and now is in a position to share that. That's key.
And for too many, maybe it's Hollywood kids of privilege, when not a lot is expected of them. It does not create the foundation to manage themselves, going forward. And Tracee obviously had some pretty strong guidance from her mom and dad as a youngster. And the Ivy League education, of course, just going to a 4-year college is an accomplishment, but to have graduated from Brown and to have had that as the foundation to prepare her for who she has become, which just makes her vocabulary and ability to address the issues of the world, and even so much as a friend, having the intellect and the ability to find the words. Right. I've always admired that about her. And as she's grown in prominence, that seems to have really suited her quite well.
I think she had great examples, because no matter who her mother was for the world in the captions of stage presence, it's who she was at home, right? So that is what really nurtures a family. When she talked about, we don't sit on the couch or the chairs that are provided. They may be all arranged. We all kind of just sort of like lay on the floor. We are comfortable at home and drive the distance just to be there, with one another. It was really wonderful to watch and see her as an adult woman. Mm-hmm. I know the journey. There's a long side. We're watching different young Black Americans over the decades find their place in this world that's predetermined in the entertainment field, notwithstanding the restaurant industry or the hospitality industry, but get to a place where you do thrive, you do manage, and we're all in parallel lanes with one another, and they do intersect. Listening to the two of you share areas in which you intersected, and it didn't end, right? Mm-hmm. So it could have been in the 90s, and it was throughout the journey of your restaurants. And now she's who she is in this context, and she acknowledges your evolutions as well. That's who we are in this culture, in this world, in this space, that sometimes we'll be in different paths, but we have to figure out, where do we intersect? Mm-hmm. And how authentic are those moments, so that even if there's another pause, we know when we come back together again, there'll be an authentic intersection.
We pick up the conversation right where we left off, so to speak. Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Ambassador Shabazz, it's always a pleasure. And what's the weather like in Louisville? Is it starting to be spring?
It's actually pretty nice. It's actually pretty nice. You know, the Derby was not too long ago, and people were doing their kind of spaced fractional engagements. We're looking forward to 2022. And following May, the Derby, is June, which is generally Muhammad Ali Festival. So this year won't be very busy, but next year will, and it will time with his 80th birthday. So we're hoping that it doesn't just stop and start with the horses, but that we kind of have a people's Derby next year.
Yeah, that would be phenomenal. But yeah, we're a year away from really feeling like we can gather in any large numbers publicly. Right. But we look forward to that event. Yeah. Well, enjoy spring in Louisville, and I hope to see you in person real soon.
Very, very soon. And let people know that this is that June is Black Music Month. So tune in. You know, we talk about your playlists. You know, load them up. Mr. Glover said that he likes old music, and we talk about contemporary music. Let's learn about it. Let's become ethnomusicologists during the month of June for Black Music Month.
Musicologists. Well, we are going to have a Corner Table Talk playlist coming up, so you just further inspired me. Ambassador Shabazz, thank you as always, and see you soon.
See you soon.
Corner Table Talk is hosted by Brad Johnson, produced by Brad and Linda Ailes Johnson, coordinating producer Lauren Turner, theme music Life Goes On by Bryce Vine, executive producers Omar Thompson, Andrew Kalb, and Ken Johnson. Find the Corner Table Talk podcast wherever you get your podcast. Follow, subscribe, rate, and leave a comment. Corner Table Talk is a Say It Loud Network production.